Have you ever wondered why some prayers seem to vanish into thin air while others manifest with miraculous speed? The difference isn't in the words you speak or how fervently you plead. It lies in something far more fundamental that most spiritual seekers completely miss. When Jesus uttered those 5 transformative words, "I and the Father are one," was he making an exclusive claim about his unique divinity? Or was he revealing the most profound spiritual truth available to every human being? This question has shaped religious thought for 2 millennia, yet its deepest implications remain hidden in plain sight. What if I told you that this single statement contains the master key to effective prayer, manifestation, healing, and spiritual awakening? Has this ever happened to you? You pray with complete sincerity, follow all the spiritual rules, yet feel as though an invisible barrier stands between you and divine connection. For decades, spiritual teacher Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to uncovering the revolutionary implications behind Jesus' words. What he discovered challenges everything most of us have been taught about our relationship with the divine. This isn't just another spiritual concept. It's a complete paradigm shift that transforms prayer from begging to receiving, from separation to oneness. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The majority of spiritual seekers operate from what Goldsmith called a consciousness of separation, an ingrained belief that we stand apart from God, disconnected from divine reality. This perception creates an illusory gap that no amount of conventional prayer can bridge. We plead across this imagined chasm, wondering why our words don't reach the other side. But what if there is no gap to cross? What if the very premise of separation is the fundamental illusion blocking your spiritual realization? Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind "I and the Father are one" shatters this illusion completely, and with it transforms every aspect of your spiritual practice. Think of it this way. When you believe you're separate from God, your prayers become negotiations with an external power. You ask, you plead, you bargain, all from a position of disconnection. But what happens within when you truly grasp that you and the Father are one? Everything changes. Your prayers no longer travel outward. They awaken what already exists within your true nature. This isn't mere positive thinking or metaphorical language. What you're about to discover might surprise you because it challenges the very foundation of how most people approach spirituality. It's not about becoming worthy of connection with the divine. It's about recognizing a oneness that has never been broken. The reason most people struggle spiritually isn't because they lack faith or devotion. It's because they're operating from a consciousness that contradicts the very truth Jesus revealed. They're trying to connect with something they believe is separate from them, when the profound reality is that this separation is entirely illusory. The profound truth Jesus was revealing in those 5 words, "I and the Father are one," wasn't a special claim about his unique divinity. It was a revelation about your fundamental nature and mine. If these teachings on divine oneness resonate with your spirit, subscribe to our channel. Every video explores transformative spiritual insights that can awaken you to your true nature. Join our community of seekers who are discovering what it truly means when Jesus said, "I and the Father are one." This mindset shift changes everything. When you approach prayer, meditation, or spiritual practice from the consciousness of oneness rather than separation, you're no longer petitioning an external power. You're recognizing what already exists within your true nature. It's like the difference between begging for water while standing in the ocean versus simply opening your awareness to the abundance that surrounds you. Your journey of spiritual awakening doesn't involve connecting with something outside yourself. It's about removing the veils that obscure the connection that has always been present. The hidden truth that Joel Goldsmith uncovered through decades of contemplative practice was that prayer in its highest form isn't asking at all, it's recognition. Think of what Jesus meant when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." This wasn't merely poetic language, it was a precise description of reality. The divine presence isn't somewhere in the distant heavens, requiring your earnest pleas to pay attention to your needs. Your divine connection is your very essence, not something to acquire through spiritual techniques or rituals. This revelation completely transforms how we understand spiritual practice. Instead of approaching God as supplicants, small, separate beings hoping to influence a greater power, we approach from the consciousness of our true identity. We recognize that divine intelligence, love, and abundance are the very fabric of our being when we clear away the illusion of separation. The impact of this understanding ripples through every aspect of life. Problems begin to dissolve, not because we've convinced God to solve them, but because we've shifted into the consciousness where solutions naturally exist. Healing occurs not because we've persuaded a distant deity to grant it, but because we've recognized the wholeness that was always our true state. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens within consciousness when you truly grasp this principle. The transformation isn't just theoretical, it's a complete rewiring of how you perceive reality. When you operate from the awareness that I and the Father are one, you access levels of intelligence, creativity, and spiritual power that remain dormant in the consciousness of separation. If this understanding is beginning to resonate with something you've always sensed, but perhaps couldn't articulate, write in the comments, "I'm awakening to oneness." When we truly understand this principle of oneness, we begin to see that everything we could ever need or desire already exists in the consciousness we share with the infinite. The blueprint of your journey isn't about acquiring or achieving something external. It's about aligning your awareness with what already exists in spiritual reality. This alignment is the essence of spiritual transformation. Most people approach life's challenges from the mindset of limitation, focusing intensely on the problem itself. They analyze it, worry about it, and inadvertently anchor their consciousness in the very vibration that perpetuates the issue. It's like trying to clean muddy water by stirring it more vigorously. No matter how sincere your intentions, you remain locked in the same pattern. Joel Goldsmith's revolutionary insight was that effective spiritual work isn't about fixing problems at their own level. It's about elevating your consciousness to the realm where solutions naturally exist. Think about how different your approach becomes when you operate from this understanding. Instead of desperately trying to solve a financial crisis from a mindset of lack, you shift your awareness to the consciousness of infinite abundance that is your true nature. This isn't magical thinking or denial of practical realities. It's recognizing a higher dimension of experience that remains hidden when we're fixated on material appearances. The revelation here is that problems only exist at certain levels of consciousness. Rise above that level, and what seemed impossible suddenly reveals obvious solutions. Imagine the profound inner shift that happens when you move from hoping or wishing that you and God are connected to knowing with absolute certainty that I and the Father are one. Not as an intellectual concept or temporary emotional state, but as your fundamental identity. This knowing transforms everything because it alters the very foundation from which you perceive and interact with life. From this elevated awareness, prayer becomes something entirely different. It's no longer a petition addressed to a separate being. It's a recognition of what is eternally true in the spiritual dimension of existence. You're not trying to convince God to solve your problems. You're aligning with the consciousness where those problems don't exist in the first place. This is why so many people experience what appear to be miraculous healings, synchronicities, and transformations when they grasp this principle. The miracles don't come because they've finally found the right words to persuade God. They come because the shift in consciousness naturally aligns them with a different order of reality, one where divine harmony is the natural state. Let me share something that might illuminate this concept even further. When you observe how consciousness shapes experience in your daily life, you'll notice that the same external circumstances feel entirely different depending on your internal state. The secret is learning to anchor your awareness in the consciousness of oneness regardless of appearances. If you've ever experienced moments where you felt completely aligned with a sense of greater purpose or intelligence beyond your personal thinking, type "I've glimpsed oneness" in the comments below. Those glimpses of oneness are far more significant than most people realize. They're not just pleasant spiritual experiences. They're moments when the veil of separation temporarily thins, allowing you to experience your true nature. The question becomes, how do we transform these fleeting moments into a consistent reality? Joel Goldsmith made a profound discovery through decades of spiritual practice. He found that authentic spiritual connection isn't about projecting requests outward, but about deep, receptive listening. When you truly understand your oneness with God, prayer transforms from monologue to dialogue, or more accurately, into a receptive silence where revelation can occur. Think of it as tuning your awareness to a frequency that's always broadcasting, but rarely heard above the noise of everyday thinking. The wisdom, guidance, and insight you seek aren't external treasures to be hunted down. They're already present within the divine intelligence that is your true mind. The revelation here is that divine wisdom actually precedes your questions in spiritual reality. This insight catalyzes a complete paradigm shift in spiritual practice. Most approaches to prayer focus on speaking, asking, affirming, all forms of output, but the breakthrough occurs when we prioritize receptivity over activity. It's like the difference between frantically searching for water in the desert versus becoming still enough to hear the underground spring beneath your feet. This is precisely why Joel emphasized contemplative meditation over petitionary prayer. In the silence, something miraculous happens. When your human mind becomes quiet, when the constant chatter of thoughts, worries, and plans temporarily subsides, the divine reality that has always been present can finally express itself through your awareness. The journey into this kind of meditation isn't about achieving some extraordinary mental state through sheer willpower. It's about surrendering the belief that you're separate from divine mind. It's about recognizing that your true consciousness is already one with God. This recognition doesn't require mental gymnastics or spiritual techniques. It requires letting go of the very idea that there's a gap to be bridged. You begin to experience oneness not through mental effort, but through spiritual receptivity. Your consciousness naturally becomes clear, still, and aligned with truth when you stop reinforcing the illusion of separation. It's like a pond that becomes perfectly reflective, not by trying to reflect, but by allowing its waters to become still. This receptivity represents a profound psychological reversal from how most people approach spirituality. Instead of striving to reach God through spiritual achievement, you recognize that divine presence is the foundation of your being. The only obstacle is your belief in separation, and that belief dissolves in the silence of contemplative awareness. What emerges in this silence isn't just peace or temporary relief from stress. It's a direct perception of reality that transcends intellectual understanding. You don't just think about oneness, you experience it as your actual identity. And from this experience, your entire relationship with life undergoes a radical transformation. If you've ever found that your most profound insights came not from thinking harder, but from becoming deeply quiet and receptive, share "Silence speaks truth" in the comments below. This silence reveals something profoundly transformative about the nature of problems themselves. When we truly grasp "I and the Father are one," we discover that problems don't actually dissolve because we've figured out clever solutions or forced external circumstances to change. They dissolve because we've shifted into a consciousness where we perceive the reality of oneness that was always present beneath the illusion of separation. Think about how this revelation transforms your approach to life's challenges. Most people exhaust themselves trying to manipulate conditions, convince others, or force outcomes through sheer determination. There's a fundamental misconception driving this struggle: the belief that wholeness, peace, or abundance must be created or achieved rather than recognized as already present in spiritual reality. The hidden insight that Goldsmith uncovered is that most spiritual practice fails not because people aren't trying hard enough, but because they're attempting it from the wrong standpoint entirely. They're operating from the separated self, the ego that believes it is cut off from divine intelligence and must somehow bridge an imaginary gap. This perspective creates an inherent contradiction that no amount of spiritual technique can overcome. Consider how this plays out in everyday experience. When you pray from the consciousness of separation, you're essentially reinforcing the very condition you're trying to transcend. It's like trying to heal a wound by continually reopening it. The breakthrough comes when you realize there's no gap to bridge because there never was any actual separation except in human perception. This understanding reveals something revolutionary about the nature of divine reality. God is not separate from you, withholding good until you prove worthy through correct belief, perfect behavior, or spiritual achievement. The divine is not a cosmic gatekeeper deciding when to grant favors based on the sincerity of your petitions. True spiritual realization recognizes your fundamental oneness with infinite source. The intelligence, health, abundance, and love you desire are not outside you waiting to be granted as rewards for spiritual effort. They are the very nature of the consciousness you're made of when you remember I and the Father are one. This isn't metaphorical language, it's a precise description of spiritual reality. Ready to deepen your understanding of spiritual oneness? Subscribe now to access more teachings that bridge ancient wisdom with practical living. Our channel is dedicated to helping you recognize and live from the truth that you and the Father are one, not just as a concept, but as your everyday reality. The implications of this understanding ripple through every dimension of life. When you face health challenges, financial pressure, relationship difficulties, or any other problem, your work isn't to convince God to fix them. Your work is to shift into the consciousness where you recognize that wholeness is the only reality in divine mind, and divine mind is your true mind. This shift isn't about denying material appearances or pretending problems don't exist on the human level. It's about recognizing a higher dimension of reality where these conditions have no power or permanence. It's like discovering that the frightening shadow on the wall is merely a projection without substance. The shadow doesn't need to be fought or fixed. It simply dissolves when you perceive its true nature. If you've ever experienced a problem that seemed impossible to solve suddenly dissolve when your perception shifted, type "perception is everything" in the comments. That shift in perception is exactly what Jesus was in pointing to when he said, "The Father knows what you need before you ask." This statement reveals a profound truth that transforms our entire approach to prayer and spiritual practice. It means the divine is already providing, already answering, already supplying everything necessary for your wholeness before you even recognize the need. This revelation completely reverses our usual understanding of prayer. Your role isn't to inform God of your problems or convince the divine to act on your behalf. Your role is to align your awareness with the divine provision that never stops flowing, because it is your true being. This alignment happens naturally when you recognize I and the Father are one, not as a theoretical concept, but as your actual identity. The catalyst for inner transformation occurs precisely at this crossroads, the moment you shift from asking God to provide what you need to recognizing that divine fullness is already established as the reality of your being. It's like suddenly realizing you've been searching desperately for glasses that were on your head the entire time. The revelation isn't that you finally found something new. It's that what you sought was always present, simply unrecognized. Joel Goldsmith witnessed countless real-world breakthroughs when people genuinely grasped this truth. Their lives transformed not because circumstances magically changed overnight, but because their consciousness shifted from lack to completeness, from separation to oneness. Consider Maria's journey, a woman who struggled financially for years, constantly praying for money and opportunity. Despite attending every workshop, reciting every affirmation, and following every manifestation technique, her financial situation remained desperate. The turning point came when she encountered Goldsmith's teaching on oneness. Maria realized she had been operating from lack consciousness, reinforcing her separation from the infinite abundance that was her true nature. Instead of begging for supply, she began practicing contemplative meditation, not asking for anything, but simply resting in the awareness of already being one with infinite substance. Within months, opportunities appeared that had been there all along, but were invisible from her previous perspective of lack. Or consider James, who endured chronic pain for 7 years. He'd consulted countless healers and prayed desperately for relief. Each improvement was temporary, and eventually, he began to believe either that God was punishing him or that he was somehow unworthy of healing. When he discovered Goldsmith's principle of oneness, everything shifted. James stopped pleading for his pain to disappear. Instead, he dedicated time each day to recognizing the spiritual perfection that was already established as his real being. He didn't deny the pain when it appeared, but he refused to give it ultimate reality in his consciousness. Gradually, not only did the physical symptoms diminish, but more importantly, his fear and identification with the condition dissolved completely. These transformations didn't come through finding better techniques to convince God to help them. They came through a fundamental shift in identity, from seeing themselves as separate beings needing divine intervention to recognizing their oneness with the infinite source of all good. This recognition isn't just about physical healing or financial abundance. It transforms every dimension of human experience because it addresses the root cause of all suffering, the belief in separation from our divine source. If you've experienced a moment when something you'd been striving for suddenly appeared, when you stopped struggling and simply opened to receive it, share "Surrender opened the way" in the comments. That surrender is at the heart of a powerful practice Joel Goldsmith taught called resting in the Word. This approach transforms how we engage with spiritual truth. When you truly understand I and the Father are one, your entire relationship with spiritual practice shifts. Instead of repeatedly asking for things or desperately affirming truths you don't yet believe, you select a spiritual principle that addresses the consciousness behind whatever problem you're facing. The key insight here is that you don't use this truth as a mental hammer, repeating it mechanically like an affirmation. Instead, you rest in it, allowing it to permeate your awareness like sunlight gradually warming and illuminating a room. You marinate in this divine reality until it becomes more real to your consciousness than the material appearance you're facing. For example, if you're dealing with financial pressure, instead of frantically affirming abundance while secretly fearing lack, you might rest in the truth that infinite substance is the nature of divine being, and divine being is your true identity. You sit with this reality, not as something to achieve, but as something to recognize and remember. This practice creates a profound psychological alchemy. The truth doesn't just remain intellectual knowledge. It penetrates the deeper levels of consciousness where transformation actually occurs. It's like the difference between memorizing facts about water versus immersing yourself in the ocean. One is information, the other is experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into another revolutionary technique Joel discovered. He called it impersonal realization, and it represents a quantum leap in spiritual practice. Most approaches to prayer and meditation remain intensely personal, focused entirely on me and my problems, my healing, my prosperity, my relationships. This personal focus actually limits what consciousness can receive because it keeps awareness small and self-centered. Impersonal realization expands your awareness beyond personal concerns to recognize that oneness with God is the truth of existence itself for everyone and everything. When you practice this approach, you're not asking for your healing but recognizing that wholeness is the nature of divine reality for all. You're not pleading for your supply, but acknowledging that infinite abundance is the truth of existence itself. This universal perspective might seem counterintuitive. How can focusing on everyone help my specific situation? The revelation is that when you rise into universal consciousness, you access a dimension where all good is already established. From that elevated awareness, your personal experience naturally reflects the universal truth you've recognized. This shift from personal to impersonal awareness catalyzes breakthroughs that remain impossible from the limited perspective of the separate self. It's like trying to move a massive boulder. Pushing against it directly with personal effort yields minimal results. But understanding the universal principles of leverage allows effortless movement. The impersonal approach doesn't mean you become detached or uncaring about your specific needs. Rather, it means you address them from a higher vantage point, from the consciousness of oneness rather than separation. This elevated perspective dissolves limitations that appear insurmountable at the personal level. If you've noticed how focusing on helping others sometimes mysteriously resolves your own challenges, type "universal flows to all" in the comments. That universal flow reveals the next evolutionary stage of spiritual unfoldment, what Joel Goldsmith called living by grace. This represents the ultimate breakthrough in consciousness. It means shifting entirely from trying to make things happen through personal effort to recognizing that divine intelligence is already being all, doing all, and expressing all through you. When you truly grasp, I and the Father are one, you stop seeing yourself as a human being occasionally connecting with God and start recognizing yourself as divine consciousness having a human experience. This perspective shift creates a complete revolution in how you approach every dimension of life. Living by grace means you no longer wake up wondering how to force the day to unfold according to your plans. Instead, you wake with the awareness that infinite intelligence is already orchestrating your day with wisdom far beyond your personal planning. You stop trying to get God to act and start acknowledging the divine action that never ceases because you and the Father truly are one. This milestone on your spiritual journey doesn't mean you become passive or abdicate responsibility. Rather, you discover what true responsibility looks like. The ability to respond from oneness rather than separation, from wholeness rather than lack. You still take practical steps and make decisions, but these actions flow from a different source. Not from anxiety and control, but from inspiration and guidance. The revelation at the heart of living by grace is that you're not a human entity struggling to connect with divine power. You're an individualization of that power itself, having temporarily forgotten your true identity. The awakening process isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering what you've always been. Consider how this understanding transforms your daily experience. Challenges still appear in your human journey, but you meet them from an entirely different foundation. Instead of reacting from fear or limitation, you respond from the awareness of your divine identity, which transcends every material restriction. Problems that once seemed overwhelming now appear as opportunities to demonstrate the truth of oneness in practical experience. This doesn't mean life becomes perfectly smooth or that difficulties magically disappear. What changes is your relationship to these experiences. You no longer see them as evidence of separation from good, but as temporary appearances that have no power to define your true being. You meet each situation from the unshakable foundation of knowing I and the Father are one. The practical effects of this consciousness shift ripple through every dimension of life. Decisions that once caused anxiety now flow naturally from inner guidance. Relationships transform as you begin to recognize the same divine presence expressing through others that expresses through you. Work becomes not just a means of earning money, but a channel for divine creativity to flow into visible expression. This is the promise hidden within Jesus' words, not that we should worship him as uniquely divine, but that we should recognize in ourselves the same oneness with God that he demonstrated. When you truly understand I and the Father are one, as Jesus and Joel Goldsmith taught it, your entire relationship with reality undergoes a metamorphosis more profound than any external achievement could ever create. If you're beginning to sense that this teaching speaks to something you've always known deep within but perhaps couldn't articulate, write, "The oneness was always there" in the comments. As we bring this exploration to a close, I'm reminded that the teachings of Jesus and Joel Goldsmith aren't just philosophical concepts. They're invitations to a completely transformed experience of reality. The truth that I and the Father are one isn't something to simply believe in, but something to live from. It's a truth that has the power to dissolve problems, heal relationships, and reveal the limitless good that's already present in your life. If these ideas have resonated with you today, I'd love for you to be part of this ongoing conversation. Subscribe to join our spiritual community where we explore these profound truths each week. The insights I share aren't theoretical, they're practical wisdom that can transform how you experience every dimension of life. I've poured my heart into creating this content because I know firsthand how understanding these principles can completely reshape your journey. If you found value in today's message, a simple like lets me know these teachings are reaching the right people. And if this message spoke directly to your soul today, if you felt something stir within you as we explored the truth of your divine identity, leave a comment with the words, "This awakening was meant for me." I read every comment and love connecting with those who are walking this path. There's a video right here that explores how to apply this principle of oneness to heal relationships in your life. Click and continue with me over there as we take these teachings even deeper into practical application.